was.
Okay, thank you. Laura just brought up an issue which we cannot deliberate about tonight because it is not on our agenda. And as far as whether or not we could address it in this, we've been involved in rules revision for over a year. My own personal opinion is that we are at this point perhaps stretching to be able to do something that we have not considered during this last year. My colleagues can weigh in on their own thoughts on that. But perhaps when we get into the rules discussion, might be a better time to, when we're saying we're wrapping this up with this is not only our own proposal to, that we are going to put out for informational meeting, and then we will be having another meeting after that. So there is possibility that we could discuss it then. Okay, anything else? Okay, minutes of the August 1st meeting. Probably it's been that long, but I guess it has been. The summer is coming and going.
Yes.
The only thing I saw was on the pay bills part, the comment that Hudson reported prior, that was not a Solitude bill. The bill that was submitted late was the annual bill from Stowe to Hudson was submitted after the 2-week deadline. So the way the towns work is, the end of the fiscal year happens, June 30th, and you got 2 weeks to submit all the bills. And so the bill from Stowe to Hudson didn't come in, I think, until what, August? It was pretty late. But anyways, it was not a Solitude bill. It was the town bill for Hudson's share of the LBC budget,
The operating budget.
operating budget.
Right.
Okay, so are you making a motion to,
So what, you want to correct the language?
Yeah, you don't need a motion, it's just
No,
correcting the
no.
okay,
numbers.
To motion, to approve the,
Where it says Conrad commented that Hudson reported a
Yep.
prior operating bill from, it should say operational bill from Stowe was submitted late to Hudson.
okay, operation bills.
Okay.
But the reference to the Solitude up above is correct? Yeah.
Yes.
okay.
Okay, but it did get paid, I guess, you just.
Yes, in fact,
you
it's
would
right
just-
here in this bill.
Yeah. No,
Which bill?
no, even though.
I don't know. I do not know what happened.
Well, I'm sure if it hadn't been, somebody would have told us by now.
I wouldn't bet on that. It would seem like it should be, but Tricia said that she'd figure out a way to make it happen. That's the
Yeah,
last I heard
okay.
from anybody.
Okay.
Tricia's the treasurer in Hudson.
Okay, anything else? If not, take a motion, approve as amended.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
I'll second. Any discussion? Not? Okay. All in favor, say aye. 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 Moving to bills.
We have, the only bill I have is the Solitude end of the year bill. And Andy said he'd be here to describe it, but he's got to be late. So that's just the ongoing contract with Solitude for lake management.
So the total due was the 8/12/19.
Yeah.
How? So when we met last time in August, we
If you look at the bottom, it gives you the numbers. We don't pay it all at once. We pay so much at certain times.
Okay.
So the August bill was here in my,
This is past due, and it came in to you,
last saw a couple weeks ago. What's the total on that one? I see that, that's a good point, it is, yes, 1219, has someone not
Is it-
paid this? Hudson hasn't paid their share? Oh. I'll have to find out then, no, that's not a new bill then.
Is it this one still?
yeah, that's what he's got. So the 1219 is Hudson's share. No,
No,
I'm just looking at the bill, so is it the same one that we approved or not?
it's
No,
not this
it's
one,
not,
no.
it's a different one. So
It's
this
a
is,
different date, right?
yeah,
what's the invoice number on that one, Don? 513?
188340.
This is 513.
Seven.
And I got
71.
513, which is this one, and 1219, okay, let me find out, maybe Hudson didn't get this paid, I'll have to find out. I turned it into him. I'll find out
And
what
that's
happened.
from
See
June.
that,
That
because-
one's, are we talking, so we're talking about one that's from June, is that what?
Yeah, this is
Okay,
a
so-
July bill.
Right, so I don't have with me the ones
I
from.
do it here, Chris, I
Okay,
have an extra one.
I'm just, as far as the one that we approved, is
Yep, all approved, it should have been paid by Hudson, and I know I
Alright.
turned it into Rory, so I gotta go find out what
Okay.
happened.
Okay,
I'm sure I
Sorry, my
have a
bad.
copy of that, I don't need
I
that.
didn't even think about that.
Okay.
you have nothing else?
I have nothing else. I thought that was a new, I didn't open it till tonight.
Okay, just in the realm of public comment, I will make a response to a comment that I've received from a couple of people concerning the drawdown. So it's kind of general information passed along in that vein. I had requested Highway Department to remove the first board on or about October 1st. There was a problem, one individual had getting a boat out of the stumpy area, so that as a result of that, the first board was not taken out until October 5 was a Friday. Dave Gray reported today that the water level is 2.3, which, and I went over and looked at it myself earlier. The second board has been taken out, which is, I had kind of left it to Mike's discretion as to when to do that. So the second board is removed, and it appears, without speaking to Mike, that there must have been two larger boards, because it looks, looking down on the spillway, as if there's no more boards to take out. At 2.3, that means it's down about 8 inches from its high point. So we should be on track to reach our lowest level by November 1st, which is what DEP always wanted us to do and what our order of conditions
Yep.
directs us to do. So that's just a reminder for anyone, and it's an answer to a public comment that wasn't submitted to me tonight.
It's going down
But
quickly,
it's
though.
going down quickly, the water's rushing out of there, so if you have any issues, anybody here or watching, about getting boats out in shallow areas, be aware. Okay, Conrad asked that this next agenda item be put on here,
Yeah.
so take it away, Conrad.
There's a lot of trees around the lake that have fallen into the water. There's a bunch that are gonna go in this winter. There's birch trees, et cetera, that they're this far above the water now, and they're not gonna make it through the winter. We've always had a rule on that, about throwing things into the lake, and I don't know if that covers that or not. But,
My reading of that is, it's a stretch. You're talking about raking leaves and clippings and stuff.
mhm.
I think if it was meant to say, nobody's doing it deliberately, that happens by act of God or erosion or
Right.
old age or whatever else. It's gone on for years.
I think it's gonna be a bigger problem in the spring, because the pure quantity of them, that if you drive around right now, you see them.
Yeah, I think we're getting more and more erosion. So the
That's
stuff,
birch trees that are erosion, they reach out over the lake and,
yeah,
cause that's where the light is, and eventually they're like this, and down they come.
yeah.
But the last one in the first basin was a pine that fell down.
That was down around the corner,
Yeah,
yeah.
so they're all susceptible to doing it,
Yeah, well, the pines get big, and eventually
Yeah.
they get too big for where they are, and they come down.
yep.
Red's gonna work on getting his out.
Yeah,
He's got one
You
behind
tried to
his
help
house.
me pull that out, unsuccessfully, but
Yeah,
as soon as the water goes down more, we'll start
so,
more off of it.
I don't know where we stand on that legally, rules wise. But I foresee it to be a bigger problem in the spring. So I don't,
So what are you asking?
I don't have,
You-
well, my first question was, under our rules about throwing things in the lake. You didn't throw it in the lake, but it is your tree. Well, it is the landowner's tree, and it is in the lake and it's not supposed to be there, so. So there's actually two things that we're gonna have to worry about maybe in the spring. The trees that I think are gonna go in is one, and then we have quite a few docks around the lake that are in bad repair. And I think those two issues are gonna be an issue. Maybe for now, we can, I don't know, something we gotta worry about, that's why I
No
bring it
person
up.
shall throw, drop, or place in the waters of Lake Boon any waste paper, rubbish, brush, leaves, grass clippings, pine needles, or refuse. I think you would, if you tried to give somebody a ticket for having a tree in the lake in front of their house and not removing it under that, I don't think it would stand up.
Yeah, cause the person didn't do it.
But it isn't covered either.
Yeah.
It doesn't say trees.
Yeah,
It says
Yeah, I thought
leaves,
we
trees
had-
have leaves on them.
yeah, I thought we had some conversation with our, the town,
I spoke very,
and I thought they were willing to help out
It
if
says-
something goes in.
if it's a hazard to navigation
Yeah.
or safety or something, I think
Yeah.
our town administrator has suggested that perhaps with a case-by-case basis, we could look at, the town, through its highway department, depending on accessibility and whatever else, having the highway department do it. That request has never been, we haven't carried that forward, and it certainly wouldn't apply to Hudson. So perhaps you, as
So most of the ones I'm worried about for this coming season are in Hudson.
So my suggestion would be have
I could talk
a
to
chat
my
with
town
Mr.
manager.
Moses
Yeah,
and tell him that, is there some way that we could work out some kind of
well,
an agreement that, depending on where the trees are,
yeah,
that,
and as we're gonna take public comment on the rules, maybe we should have had a rule on it. Maybe, I don't know.
well,
I just know we have a lot of big pine trees very close to the water, and they get big and they fall in, and they're hard to get out. Well, you helped get the one, is that Todd's property? No, that was
no, I told one, an oak
an oak,
from Barton Road all the way back down
yeah.
to my place, ended up cutting it out. But I found out in the process that red oak sinks. It's too heavy. But I got it there anyway. So
I guess that's all for right now, but I think we need to, when we look at our rules, and after public comment, it's been an ongoing problem over the years, we've all seen it.
okay.
I've taken a couple of them out, you've taken a couple out.
Alan Patel had one that fell down and pretty well blocked the
That's the one I was
fourth
thinking of,
basin
yeah.
narrows. He ended up hiring a company come in, Astro Crane or something, paid
Wow.
$1,000 to have it taken out.
Yeah, that's what it costs to get the ones
I'll
off.
bend the rules a little bit here because we tend to not to be as quite as doctrinaire as some of the other boards, so Dave, you got something for the good of the order?
Yeah, regarding the trees falling into the lake, I mean, there's been a number of them, as you guys say, but there's also a number of them that are there now that are actually up against the shore as like a natural wall, natural, break for the waves, so I don't know if it's possible to use them as that.
Well, depends on,
You know, obviously if they drop, you know, parallel to the shore, it's okay, but if they drop 90 degrees to the shore, it becomes a
I
navigation.
suggest the
problem.
ones that are parallel, nothing falls parallel to the shore, because they
Right.
it may end up there after a while.
They float to ours.
But I think it's rather, my comment earlier about late issues on the rules might apply here, but it may be something we need to try to deal with administratively, you know, either through encouraging.
Well,
The
in the past,
removal.
we've got 1 or 2 a year, and people eventually get them out. But as I drive around the lake right now, there's so many of them. Of course, they're smaller ones, they're birches, they're not big pines.
But there are big pines down on Halleck Point Road, properties for sale from the Dawes Estate that have been there for several years, some of them. But
Yeah.
they're big pines and they go quite a way out.
Laura's got
Yeah, Laura?
I remember recently that we talked about this. We had a tree fall on our property into the neighbor's yard, and my insurance guy said, it's like a tree falling in the woods. If it's not on your, if it falls in the neighbor's yard, it's not, the damage done is not your responsibility. So we may wanna consult legal for the town, because, but I think that if the tree falls in the lake from somebody's property, it's no longer on their property, it's like a tree falling in the woods, and it would be the town or, you know, collective responsibility to remove it, cause they are expensive to remove. But I think the bigger issue that we have to address is erosion along the shore, because that's what's causing, some trees to fall down. They don't have roots because the shores are eroding.
Okay. So,
that's all, I just wanted to,
yeah, put it on our radar for,
Yeah.
you know, perhaps, you know, at the beginning of the new year, talk to, follow up on some of these administrative, or perhaps you know, we've certainly, each of us assisted people on a private basis in the past. Most homeowners end up getting it
Most
up
homeowners get 'em
themselves,
out.
one way or another.
Yeah.
But we can certainly follow up on that later.
so Laura, there is actually a caveat to what you just said.
Okay.
If your neighbor sends you a letter saying your tree's gonna damage my property, then
Yeah.
you're responsible.
That's correct. Then I'm responsible for taking it down. If it falls and
Yeah.
I don't take it down, then I'm responsible for the damage. But if there's no previous discussion and it falls and there's damage,
Yeah.
my
Right.
insurance company is not gonna respond.
Okay.
Okay.
So you're saying you might send a letter to everyone? You have a potential tree that's gonna fall in the lake, or?
I don't, David, you
Well,
know,
let's not, I think,
the trees on the lake are
future
actually,
discussion.
they're a
Yeah.
hazard in multiple ways. You know, number one, they're a hazard because, you know, especially at night, you don't see them, you run into them, number one. Number two is they break up, and now I got floating stuff everywhere. And I don't care if you're in a powerboat or a kayak, all of a sudden you go, what's
All right.
that?
Okay, we've already said we're gonna have to have discussion about this beyond what we
Next.
have already done tonight. We'll put that as a future agenda item. Which brings us to the main item on the agenda, and you're right, that date should be 11/14
14, yeah.
on the agenda.
Yeah.
Prepare for public information meeting on November 14 was the date that we had agreed on last time. It's a Wednesday night,
Mhm.
just about a month from now.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
okay, so what I would like to suggest to the commission is that we, instead of trying to hold a single, like, big town meeting kind of thing, that we more or less set up, you can call them office hours, drop-in, whatever, so that we are present and people can drop in at any point, and we maybe set it up so we have a time where we're available in Stowe, a different time where we're available in Hudson, and let people come in and ask their questions that they have, let us understand their perspective, because we're not going to deliberate, it's not about making decisions in that, it's really the point of these would be for people to understand, here's what we're proposing, which we need to get out in advance, anyhow, so they would have had a chance to look at it, understand it, have their questions, let people come in, not necessarily as a huge forum, but the ability to come in, ask their questions, they could leave at that point. We would then be getting their perspective, and that's really what the whole point is, right? Is for us to understand if there's a perspective we haven't listened to, understood.
No, because having run many of these meetings, you get a lot of interaction where people listen to the other person. And you get comment, you get counter comment, it's not a lot different, it's not a lot different than a town meeting where people can get up and talk about a motion and, you know, another person will get up and we don't debate it, but the people in the audience, they wanna, you know, they wanna see what the comments are.
Or maybe there's some kind of a hybrid of those two, where you could have, the first part of the meeting could be individuals, you know, talking with us, and you're proposing to not include something or change something, but what's your reasoning on it, or listen to these thoughts, but then give people a chance to come back later. I can see the value in both of those. I can also see I know some of them turn into situations which get unduly heated sometimes. And it's difficult for the sponsoring agency, in this case us, to focus on, if you'll pardon the expression, the forest for the trees. But planning board, for instance, frequently holds, they get a fancy name for everything in planning, charrettes.
What are they?
Charrette. I didn't know it either until fairly recently. That basically is a chance where you might have on the wall a markup of the old one and the new one, so that you can see what they are. You could have maps and different information. The three of us could maybe speak collectively or individually to people, answer some questions, and it might take care of the need for questions in a larger session, which could follow that night or another night. Just could even break it down that way. The only timetable when we started doing this working backwards before, the process on this is we have to get these, whatever changes we want to put forth.
January 28th.
January what?
28th.
January 28th in Hudson, which is much earlier than Stowe, but that's the limiting factor. So anything that we want to sponsor has to be ready, well, not on the 28th, it's gotta be enough ahead of time so that the language can be submitted through the town administrator and however your articles are processed.
Yep.
And will they allow us to put an article on the warrant by vote as a town, cross-town agency, or do they have to vote to put it on?
Good question. I've always put them on myself as a Lake Boon Commissioner for Hudson.
Okay.
I've never had to have a vote. But what'll happen is I'll propose it, and then the selectmen will look at it, the FinCom will look at it. They'll comment on it, but it's on the warrant.
Yeah, okay.
So, you know,
Right.
you know the process, there's both.
Well, I know how it works here, but each town sometimes.
Each town's a little bit different, so, no, I have to, in this case, I have to do it,
Yeah,
because I'm the commissioner in Hudson. But but I think anybody can actually put a warrant on.
Oh, yeah,
on
you can,
town
there's a,
meeting.
there's a process by law, you just, for an annual town meeting, all you need is 10 signatures on a warrant article.
Yeah.
But in our case, the selectmen are, the respective boards of selectmen are responsible for putting the warrants together. And it's almost universal that if there's a town board that wants a separate article on the warrant as a courtesy, the selectmen will vote to put it on there, reserving the right to support it or not.
I've never seen a vote on, but I don't know, it may have happened, I never saw it.
Okay. What we're talking about now is process as opposed to, for the people sitting here, as opposed to the content. For those who have not been with us throughout this, we've had, what do you suppose, 7 meetings, something like that,
Oh, like-
over the last year? Considering we only started with a 3-page document, we've gone very slowly and deliberately. And we're ending up with a 3-page document that we have gone through very carefully. And I think one thing on our agenda tonight is that we need to agree that what we have as your V7 is in fact, does in fact incorporate all the stuff that we talked about most recently on August 1st. So maybe we just start with that as a point of departure for our discussion tonight. Then we'll talk about the process of not only how do we get input once people get there, but how do we saturate the news
Yep.
resources, and we can have a discussion about
Yep.
about how we do that. And that's primarily what we're here to do tonight. I think if there are particular questions that come up after we've had a chance to do some of this, we can take, some limited input. But we are not here tonight to go back and redo our recommendations that we've worked on for a year. If there's some minor errors in it, that somebody could point out, that's fine. Did this get posted on the website?
No.
No,
because we haven't said this
because
is
we
what
haven't,
needs to be
because we haven't done it
posted.
yet.
Right.
Right, okay.
So just to clarify, so this reflects the collective discussion and kind of decisions, and it does not reflect, for example, we had in minutes, reflects where, for example, Conray had a different perspective, right?
Done a couple of items.
Right, so that's reflected in the minutes, but not, because we can't reflect that in the actual wording of this.
But
So
if,
this
but
is,
if there was a division of opinion, and there were two of us that wanted it, it's in here.
it's in here, and then it's
And then-
reflected in the
yeah,
minutes as to
at
that
this
we had.
point.
Yeah,
But anything that's in here, depending on our process, once we get the input, we can,
Yeah,
we
and
fully
obviously-
open
Yeah.
and intend to have the opportunity to come back and change our mind or change our position on some of these items. So let's at least go through, because we've approved the minutes,
mhm,
so we just really and those address the issues that are in here. So let's make sure that this is in agreement with what we've just done with the approval of the minutes. One item on there, just to start it out, I brought up some time back. There is, the original legislation from 1941. I just happen to have a copy of the Acts of 1941.
mhm. Yeah,
Chapter 712,
mhm,
somewhere way back, and there's a law book, the Acts of 1941, on half the page has this.
mhm.
At the bottom of the page, it has Chapter 713 dealing with weights and measures in the town of Auburn or something,
Okay,
totally different.
so
So it's been wrong ever since we
Okay.
started out.
So we should remove,
It
strike
just
that.
says chapter, our authority to act as a commission comes from this document, which was signed by the governor in
This
nineteen
chapter
forty-one.
712.
So, chapter 712.
Okay.
So that's something, I did bring up at an earlier meeting, but it didn't get picked up the last time around, so.
Okay.
So do you have the minutes there? Do you wanna just go through these and make sure that they,
I've been reading these, you mean the meetings from last time? Oh,
Yeah,
I see what you're
yeah.
talking about. You're talking about this list here.
yeah, make sure that each of these is reflected in this document. I have done that and found,
I just read them again, and I didn't see anything that jumped out at me.
while I was doing that, basically, although it's 3 pages, there was less substance to it because these revised rules, we even deleted several items, and certainly not added any new contentious ones. There is nothing in here, for instance, that addresses specifically in the rules, anything to do with the 150-foot rule, anything else that is enforced by, that's all state stuff. And we say right up front, Lake Boon is a great pond, means it's governed by the boating regulations established by the state. This is the new language. And it's the boater's responsibility to know and follow those laws and regulations. In addition, there are specific rules on the lake, violations of which could result in a fine. Some of those, such as the quiet hours, for instance, which is not, you can be more restrictive than the state law, but not less. So, and that's why there is, the state would have had approved in the past, the inclusion of quiet hours, which is not something commonly found on lakes around the state. So that was my way of vamping a bit, just to give you a chance to look at that.
I think that there's some things I don't like, but that was covered in
That's
the
different.
objections and minutes.
We've recognized that but just what we're saying is, if we agree that this is the document that we are going to put forth through circulation, advertising,
Public comment.
and then take comment on it.
Yep,
That's all I'm
I'm
asking,
good with
whether
that.
we all agree on that.
I agree on that.
One small, just, we'll call it a typo. Great Pond is a legal designation.
Which one?
It's on page 2, under boating regs, where it says Lake Boon is a great pond. It should be capitalized GP.
Oh,
We agree it's a great pond, with a small g. But the state, because it meant
Yeah,
a certain
that's fine.
definition of
Yeah.
being more than 10 acres in its natural state,
Mhm.
gives it this exalted title of great pond. And there are numerous references in general laws to things that only apply to great ponds. So, those are the only 2 changes. And again, this one I wouldn't worry about, because that's just, although it might be easier if we're gonna circulate this document, just push this down, so you've got a heading on
Yeah, it just
page
depends,
3.
right, it does on mine, so it's how you print sometimes.
Yeah,
But
okay. So, are we,
so if this is our document, which.
this is the document.
which
okay.
will now be actually .8, because I will make the changes for removing the chapter 713
Right.
and capitalizing, so.
Right.
So with those changes,
Okay.
then we're good?
So then we will be presenting for public comment version 8, as recognized tonight.
So, a couple things, we don't need a motion to do that, do we?
No, I think we just do it by.
Okay. But I don't know if we need a motion to this, but I think what we should do is get a copy of this to David Gray.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now I
Yeah.
wanna get into let's take it logically. We've got the document.
Yep.
Now we wanna say, how do we get it distributed? And then we'll talk about the process, once we
Yep.
get it distributed
Yep.
and we gather on the 14th of November. And there's nothing to say that, it may very well be that is our discussion tonight, or then, there'll be another meeting even after that.
Mhm.
It's our own time schedule, with the constraint that Conrad mentioned earlier about the 28th of January.
So I think, so if we're thinking how we communicate, this, I think we certainly wanna post it on the LBC site.
I've got a list of them
Okay.
here, let me start, and
Okay.
we can either say, yeah, that's a good idea, or
Okay.
not, and maybe just make a note of them. Certainly, we wanna put both as news items and, I think, a paid ad in a paper, and it should be in one in Hudson as well. We never do it in Hudson, but for this one, we should. But I think that they would also, probably, if we write something up as some of the background for the reason for all of this, we may get a news article as well. But they certainly, the
Well-
document,
So, let me just ask you a question.
yeah,
Are you suggesting that we're asking them to actually print the content of the?
no.
Okay,
the notice of the.
okay, notice, so people
Yes.
would know that it exists and where to get it.
Yes.
I
Okay,
think we have to do that for the public meeting.
There is nothing anywhere that requires a public hearing on this. And then I use the word informational meeting with a specific difference.
So that's a good question. Should it be an informational meeting or should it actually be a hearing? Because these are real rules changes.
No, but we are gathering information, that the next official action that would be taken to perhaps create a version 9 would be after we hear from the folks at that meeting.
And if that turns out to be controversial, eventually we hope to have a public hearing.
I don't agree with that.
You don't agree with that?
No. Because it doesn't say in our legislation that we have to have a public
Yeah,
hearing.
I would have to ask
Okay,
my town
well,
clerks.
okay. Well,
Just to make sure that we're
Yeah.
dotting i's, crossing
Yeah.
t's.
but if we're required to do it, we will do it. But I'm not trying to limit this. What I'm suggesting is, after the meeting on the 14th, we come back. If we have some changes, we might wanna put just another session ourselves. Or it doesn't need to be perhaps as widely advertised, but another, invite people to come to a meeting when we consider the changes which might result from
So
this.
just to be clear, there's two different things we're talking about. One is how we advertise the public meeting.
Right, that's what I'm talking
And
about.
two, how we distribute the proposed content for the public meeting.
They cross a little bit, but just listen to some of the items and we put them in the right box. I suggest that we can, with very little effort and some help from my talented lady on my left, put this whole version onto the website. And let people know, both through notices, word of mouth, and including any notices we put out,
Which website?
the Lake Boon Commission website.
Okay,
And we could ask Dave Gray to put it on
LBA.
the LBA website. Anybody else has a website you wanna put it? It's a public document. Once, we have discussed it tonight. In the version, it says version 7, but it'll be, with only those tweaks that we've talked about, it will be the same document that we're talking about putting out for comment. But we'll, so we'll.
all right, is there a town website for Hudson?
There is.
And does LBC
No.
have
If
any?
we do, I don't know is the answer to that. I've never
Okay.
maintained it. There is, so actually the answer is yes, but I don't maintain it, the town maintains it.
Okay, so we would need
So we
to,
could submit it to the town clerk and they could put it on that website.
Where you could get information for how to get it done.
Yeah.
Point,
I
the
gotta
point
talk-
is, we wanna get it,
I gotta go talk to Joan tomorrow
Right.
anyway, so.
Similarly, ask, once we have it listed in these various websites, ask Dave Gray at the Lake Boone Association, who does the listserv distribution, to highlight that. He could send out a link.
Just, it's not a big document, just put a Word document right in the email.
We could do, if anybody has the talent to hand letter things, we could do the sandwich boards, which are kind of common ways. They belong to the association, but I'm sure that they wouldn't mind, you
I
know.
don't know.
I think we should just post it at both town building, town hall, and
Okay.
distribute it electronically the best we can. And now you're talking about how you distribute the content. So,
Well, there's one other way to do it, to make sure that ideally, if we had all kinds of money, we'd just mail it to everybody, but that's a big deal. But in a lot of instances, for a lot of things that both, primarily the association has done over the years, we made copies. This would be it'll be a 2-sheet thing, 3 sides. And we could actually probably get some volunteers to help us do it in a way that doesn't land any of us in the penitentiary for violating postal regulations. We go around and put them behind the flag, or there's a way to do it.
let me ask a question, Dave.
On mailboxes.
Dave, are we gonna do a fall LBA newsletter?
Probably be not the fall, be more in the spring.
Yeah, usually they do theirs in the spring.
So, I think, I'm just trying to.
Those are my,
Well, I know, I wanna, I
Yeah,
wanna
okay.
separate the two,
Yeah.
so when we talk about a notice of the, the process and the meeting, right? So
Right.
that's the notice, so for the notice, we're saying something in the newspapers for Stowe and Hudson, and that may be just a notice, it may be that we get an article or something, but that's telling people about, there's going to be a process for you to give input, informational meeting, whatever date, where it is. Then as far as distributing, so something going to LBA, right? So the listserv, that would be essentially letting people know also, and where to either attach the content or let them know where they can find the content, right?
Right.
So I think any of the announcements we have need to let people know where they can get the content, right? So
Yes.
it would include telling folks that, if it's in the paper or it's posted at the town halls, whatever, here's where you can get it. So I think we should, where they could get it would be, it could be emailed from LBA. It could be physically copies at either of the town halls,
Both.
right?
And the libraries,
Could be.
people look at mail, look at newsletters now.
So,
Copies available in public places,
Yep.
which can be referenced in the notices.
and then we said on our websites, both the LBC, whatever Connie finds out from Hudson Town site, along with the LBA website.
Right.
So that there's a lot of places. I'm not convinced we need to be going and putting
Okay.
stuff on people's
I
mailboxes.
didn't, I'm just throwing out ideas.
No, I hear you.
Okay.
So, I think that's a lot of information. So, I guess the question I would have is, if we're going to have this meeting on the 11th, 14th, the actual content of what we need to convey as the notice, would we have to decide that today, or are we gonna have another meeting, or we just leave it to
No,
the
that-
chair?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, I can draft a notice. That's just factual information, doesn't have
Okay.
to be debated.
Okay, that's fine, I just wanna,
On November 14, at such and such, the location,
Yep.
at that time, this will be discussed, and copies
Okay.
are available. It's a result of a process going on for so-and-so,
Okay.
and copies are available the following places: websites,
yeah.
hard copies, et cetera.
okay. Okay, all right, so that kind of Does that
Anything
cover
else on
all
that?
the places you
It's
were,
good for me, I mean, it's.
so we're not thinking in terms of sandwich boards and not
Okay,
thinking
all right.
of, you know, stuffing mailboxes or attaching to mailboxes?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Now,
then,
so what do you think about the idea on the paid ad?
I agree.
oh, I think we have to do something there,
Well,
right?
I don't,
Or we don't have,
but I'm
okay.
suggesting we,
Okay,
I think it's good policy,
Yeah.
it's not required,
okay,
but, you know, err on the side of caution, I
I
think.
agree.
yeah,
Okay. And that should be,
So
that,
when you come up with a notice, we'll just pay for a legal notice in both papers. Is it what, Stowe Independent now?
is the paper with largest circulation, yeah.
And there's, was one in Hudson too.
Hudson's
Sun.
Sun is a daily, 5 days a week or something, I think, it used to be anyway. I don't know, not having lived there for a long time.
And I don't.
I don't know if anybody around here read the Hudson Sun?
I think it's weekly.
Is there anybody from Hudson?
I think it's weekly,
Hudson Sun's weekly now?
I believe so.
Yeah, so we should, if we're gonna, well, those are the two papers we should put a notice in.
Can you find out contact
Yeah.
information for me on that, please? And that's something I can work on in the next week or so to get, and then look at the calendar to figure when the best, you put it out too far ahead, people forget about it. But Stowe's case, it's a weekly paper, so probably 10 days ahead, something like that.
14th's not that far away.
It's a month,
Yeah.
just about a month, 4 weeks.
okay.
Okay.
So then, do we need to reserve a place? If we're thinking this is going to be one,
Yeah, and that's gonna be a hard one to call. I mean, tonight, I think people not expecting to hear any substantive discussion, and would pretty well fill this room up. My suggestion would be to see about getting the town hall.
The town hall or the new town
Well,
center?
either one. What, the Pompacitic Center is a room that holds 300 people. But
I'm good with either one. We filled the town hall several times. When when I did a couple of them, I actually used the big auditorium up at the elementary scale.
well, we've done 2 up there, but the safest way would be to see if we could get the big room at Pompo, and if you set up a few chairs and add 2 or more as you need it, but
I haven't been in there, but I would
It's a-
prefer to
it's-
do it there.
it's a big room,
And it's got a PA system.
and there's a lot of parking,
Yeah, that would be
so
good.
that probably makes more sense,
I guess.
because parking around here is
Yeah.
scattershot.
So if it's going to be held as in the format of a public meeting, right, then there have to be mics and all of that for people who wanna talk,
to be
because you're in a
what?
large room. As opposed to, what I would suggest is we do more of a drop-in and whatever, which we wouldn't need all that formality and not a huge room or whatever. But if we're expecting everybody to come and we're saying it's from 7:30 until 9, then we're gonna have a lot of people, right, who, well, presumably could have a lot of people, and if the point is that everybody should be able to hear what everyone else is saying, then we have to have
Just like a
kind of
town
that set
meeting,
up, yeah.
set it up the same way.
So I need the audio. And chances are, our friends who are upstairs recording this even as we speak, this meeting, have to coordinate with them, and perhaps I think in the past, they have audio equipment, but I'll find out how that would work.
So would it be something that we would video record, because we're not deliberating?
It's up to them. It's a public meeting. They can do it, they do items, not just all governmental things, they do historical situations.
Okay.
It's another way to get the word out to people, because they put it out on YouTube or something afterwards.
So I don't think this is controversial enough, but when I did a couple of mine, I had to have police presence. I did.
I hope we don't need that.
I would hope.
You laugh, but if I remember right, someone got escorted out by the police. So, but, that was around drawdown and some of the other stuff we did.
Yeah. So, all right, we're gonna agree, we'll try to do it at Pompo.
Yeah.
TV, and the audio. Then, okay, so now we've
It's
got,
open, you can just go up and take a look at the place, right? During the day,
take a look at what place.
Pompo, I've never been in it,
You can't, anybody, yeah, there, it's open.
it's open,
If you go at 10 o'clock in the morning, you might be in the middle of
Oh,
a
I
woman's,
see.
a woman's yoga class or something,
Oh,
but,
that would be fun.
but most of the time, it's not
I
being
just wanna see
used
the
as they go
facility.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah, you go in and it's just turn right and it's down the end of the hall, so, there's a big commercial kitchen attached to it, they do, meal functions and all kinds of stuff there.
Okay, what else?
So time?
I think 7:30 works best. Oh, most town things start at 7, but I always hear that in our own case, quick straw poll. How many people would prefer 7 o'clock as opposed to 7:30? How about 7 o'clock? 7:30. Yeah, 7:30. That's why we start our meetings at 7:30. Most town meetings town boards meet at 7.
Yep.
And it's a rush for people if they're
Yep.
coming home from work.
So are we bounding it, or could this go as long as it,
Well,
well,
We can cut it off.
yeah,
I wouldn't put an end time on it.
no, I
would just
wouldn't
say-
put the end time on, but, so now we're getting down to the format. Perhaps a brief and decided that ideally, by the time people get there, they will have read all of this stuff and,
we have to assume, I think we need to assume that we're not gonna read this to anybody. It's literally
But I
open the
no.
floor.
but I think first,
We'll just open it up with standard comments and then go right into public comment.
but we ought to have a brief introduction as to why we're doing this in the first place. How, just the overview of how we arrived at version 8 of this document. And maybe highlight a couple of the things that it is and things that it isn't. Just as I did in my little killing time comment. Basically, what we're saying to people on the voting regs, which is why most people are here, it's not the general rules, is that same way as when you get in your car and you go out on the road, your responsibility to know the rules of the road. And a police officer pulls you over, they may point out some fine legal language if they're citing you on something. The same would go here. Again, we don't do any enforcement any longer, at all, can't. On the voting regs, let's leave aside the others that may or may not.
We can still write a ticket, what we don't do is go actively stop votes.
Well,
I'm just being,
all right, but we haven't done
We
that,
haven't
so
done
let's not,
right, we haven't done
let's
it.
not deal with hypotheticals as much, perhaps.
All right, so we're talking, the format is a very brief introduction, which would cover a little bit about why we're doing it,
The
we're
process that's
doing,
brought us to this point.
why we're
what-
doing it, what the
and
process has
what
been.
happened after this.
Yeah,
That it has to go through
Right.
town meetings, we have to
Yep.
submit it to the state, and
Yep.
then we have to post it,
right.
advertise it when it comes back.
Is there a projector there?
I don't think so. No, I don't believe it's there. I don't know if we wanna get into,
PowerPoints?
no, I don't think we need to do. I don't,
No PowerPoints, just a verbal introduction
yeah,
and a request for comment. And the big thing is we wanna have lots of copies of the
Yep.
rules with us.
yep.
with the proposed rules, these aren't the rules now.
Right.
But we'll ask people, if you picked them up from someplace else, bring them with you, so we don't have to duplicate for, but have enough other ones. What am I missing? Anything?
We wanna go to Staples and have a big board printed up,
Saying what?
this the rule. You could have this blown up onto good-sized posters.
I don't know
But
how
if it-
that helps. I mean, people probably are better off having it in their
Yeah.
hand.
Okay.
Hopefully, we'll have made whatever
Yeah,
notes they
because
have.
hopefully we've done this soon enough, people, if they get their own copy of it, they pick it up, or
Yeah.
print it off the website or whatever, they can mark up their own versions and any comments that they might wanna make, right on their own copy.
Okay.
So I have a question of process. Do we have to record every person's input?
It's not a public hearing, so
Right.
that's the difference.
Right,
No,
okay.
it's
I
enough
mean,
for,
I think we're gonna wanna capture
it's-
things that either were different from what we thought or whatever, but.
it's a posted public meeting for us, so we have to produce minutes of that meeting, just the way you're doing
Yep.
for this meeting tonight. And it's enough for, if three people make a comment about water skiing in the third basin, for instance, we can say that we had a discussion about that in the commission. It's implicit in all these things that the commission is going to take into consideration
Yeah,
what we've
right.
heard. So the notes should just remind us the general subject areas. One of the rules we're proposing, by the way, is no water skiing in the third basin. How controversial is that?
Mr. Chairman, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Are you still, unless correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm not sure. Are you still, the commission operates still under what's written in the, Act 1941, correct?
No,
So what I read is that it does need to be a public hearing.
pardon me?
It's supposed to be a public hearing.
Okay.
It's what's written. Notice in a public hearing for, alterations, changes to the rules.
Okay, so I haven't gone back and looked at it myself for
Okay.
many
I was
years.
looking.
Okay. So, all right, so any place we're talking about,
I just wanted to tell you, because if it was gonna change what you're talking about, which is about the format.
okay,
Well, the only big change in that format is that we do need to capture every comment.
Oh my goodness. Well, then we're gonna have more than one person taking notes.
not every comment verbatim.
No. But we have to have good notes of what happened.
You have a
We can
sign-in,
record it.
you have a
Yeah,
sign,
but then you still have to take,
yeah,
can
sign-in
we get
sheet.
someone to help take notes?
I'm sure.
Because we want to be listening and engaged, and by taking notes, you tend to get pulled out of that. You're
Yeah.
trying too hard to take down information.
Maybe you could find a volunteer. Well, you have a lot of people around the lake who are saying, gee, we'd love to help you out with doing some things.
Well, I think we should record it, no matter what, the audio at least,
Well, if Stowe TV is recording it,
that we have it.
you have it that way, and it's on, that's the other reason for using the mic and making sure everybody speaks into the mic, so that if it's a question of going back and, although, when the planning board, for instance, does public hearings, they don't record them at all.
No, they just take the
They
input.
have notes, and their notes tend to be summary of comments as opposed to if Joe took a deep breath and then said the following.
No, I don't want that.
Thanks for picking up on that, Andy, so. All it means is we're gonna call it, instead of public informational meeting, we're holding a public hearing.
Because the rules change.
Because the legal notice would say pursuant to chapter 712 of the Acts of 1941, the
Right.
commission will hold a public hearing
Right.
on rules revision. It doesn't have to get into all of
Right.
the specifics
Proposed
of it.
bylaw revisions.
Um,
Yep, okay. What else do you need, Chris? Who's gonna reserve the hall?
I'll deal with that.
So we'll get the hall reserved for that night.
And I'll talk to Stowe TV folks about,
We want audio that night,
yep,
and it would be nice to have roving microphones for people that wanna speak,
Right.
and microphones for us so we can speak. We shouldn't be talking too much.
Right, you shouldn't, I mean, really, it's the kickoff and
Really to
perhaps
listen,
the,
to listen.
I think it's not too burdensome. We do it at every town meeting. You don't have roving mics. You have a mic set up at the front. If you
Well,
want to speak,
well,
you
that's
walk
what
up
it
to the
means.
the
Yeah.
mic.
Either way, I don't
Yeah,
care.
all right. Let's not argue about,
What mics and public comment,
yeah.
how it works, yeah.
Okay. What else?
I don't have anything else. The only thing I might suggest is, since we have a lot more people in the room, you might wanna reopen the public comment for a minute or two.
I was gonna do that.
Okay. So I don't have anything else.
Having heard all of what you've heard, which has probably bored the heck out of most of you, and keeping in mind that we're not asking for your input on specifics tonight, that's the purpose why we're here, going over all of this. But if there's a few things primarily on the process, or that you'd like to ask us about now, take some questions and just don't go too far afield. Yep, go ahead.
Is the meeting just to inform, or are you opening up for rework, the things that you've written so far?
What we have said, whether we call it informational meeting or public hearing, that's just a legal distinction.
Yeah.
What we have
There's been
said,
a lot of comments about wanting people's inputs.
right,
Are you
What
gonna
we-
make changes from inputs? or-
what we have said, let me back up a little bit, that's why you need to talk about process. We've dealt with this stuff so long, we tend to forget that everybody hasn't been here, the same people some of the same faces have been here most all the time. What we've said is, we will take a first cut at this, which we have been doing, and now we're gonna put down the pens. What we said is, this is only a set of recommendations that we think makes sense in some combination or with some slight adjustment, to amend our rules to the document that you will have in front of you. Before we go through the process of, rather than just saying, okay, it's going to town meeting, you can debate it on the floor of town meeting. Nobody, the rest of town cares what goes on at Lake Boon, frankly. So, but we care about, we wanna have as much, if not consensus, at least understanding of what we're doing, the rationale for it, so that it makes sense. If it turns out 80% of the people that show up there are dead set against one item that's in here, or not, we can come back, we've said we will come back after the meeting on the 14th, have another posted meeting and say, gee, item 3G is, we're way off base on that, should we change it, delete it? God forbid, there might be a better idea than our own, that will pop up out of this process that we might want to incorporate. All of that will be possible. Nothing that is in this document is finalized, set in stone. So, does that answer your question?
I think so, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Ellen Craig, 107 Kingdom Stowe. Do you have to have a public forum meeting in Hudson as well as you're having one in Stowe? It's not required.
Everything we have done has always, Stowe is the driver of all of this administratively, just because it's bigger in the 2/3 and 1/3. I don't think any of,
It's not a Hudson or a Stowe meeting, it's an LBC
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah.
As such, we can have it wherever we want.
Got it. I know they have to
Yeah.
vote in two
Yeah.
places, so that's why I wasn't sure. if
This,
it was
the town
required.
meetings is different. but
Yeah.
the LBC
Yeah.
is literally a state thing. It's,
State authorized.
it's really a state authorized board of members appointed by the towns. So we tend to classically meet in Stowe because it's 2/3, 1/3. Stowe tends to do the administrative stuff for us.
It's the same idea that we can't have one rule for the 1/3 of the lake that's in Hudson and a different rule for the rest of the lake. It specifies that anything that we do through this process.
Same thing's true in Fort Meadow, by the way, although it's Hudson and Marlboro now.
Keep in mind, in 1941, when this thing was adopted, there was no state centralized boating regulations at all. The original requirement to put a boat on Lake Boon after 1941, you had to have a license plate that was about this big, issued by the Lake Boon Commission. And you paid a fee, I think it was $2. I had one, because my father was president of the association, I had Lake Boon 8, it was about this big. And you screw it on the side of your boat, and you pay an annual fee. Now, sometime later, when they codified Chapter 90B, they said, and that was, we found out that the lake, our predecessors on the Lake Boon Commission found out the hard way, because they waved around, hey, wait a minute, we're different, we have a special legislation. So sorry, please. State takes precedence over anything that the locals do. And that's what we've been brought up to date on in quite a startling manner a couple of years ago, when they said, "Oh, we don't care what your rules say. What you do and what you can enforce and who can enforce it is governed by state law." So some of what is in that chapter, Acts of 1941, we couldn't do anymore. It says we can regulate just by rule, without going to the state at all, originally, promulgate these rules. And that was the requirement, why they wanted you to have a public hearing. It's still there, so we'll honor what we need to do. Anybody else?
So I just wanted to show the kind of a little bit of the answer to that question. After the feedback, then the next step is that we, as the LBC, have to take that into consideration and come up with what we feel is the
Number 9.
exact wording of what we want submitted for town meeting,
Right.
to the warrants,
Right.
right? So that's not necessarily opening the whole process up all over again.
No.
We just have to take that into consideration
Yep.
and then finalize what we
Yep.
want to put forward. And I say that because, again, if we have a January time frame, we should probably be thinking in terms of what are the next 2 meetings. If the 14th is getting the input,
21st, we should meet.
we may have to meet very quickly thereafter, so that we are then in a position to have one more meeting, because we're gonna wanna
Yeah,
word whatever else has to go into the warrant, right? I don't
yeah.
know.
So the following Wednesday, how about that?
21st, that is the following Wednesday,
The
which is
21st?
the day before Thanksgiving.
No, we don't wanna do that. Nobody's gonna be around to do
Yeah,
it
that's
before
not gonna work.
Thanksgiving. So we go the
The
week
next
after.
possibility for me is the 5th of December. I'm gone the week after Thanksgiving. So I return on, when do I return? I don't know. When I get back on the 1st of December.
What's
What
the first
about-
Wednesday after
What
that?
about the 20th?
Tuesday,
Right back up the board day.
I think there's a selectmen meeting nights. But all the boards meet, almost everybody meets on Tuesdays.
Yeah, I was just trying to say
Monday the 19th.
Monday would be the 19th. That's when the first major snowstorm will occur.
Sure.
So is that what we're proposing at the moment, the 19th?
19th works for me.
November 19. Okay.
And then do we wanna, at least for our purposes, think in terms of the one after that? So we get something on our calendars?
Yeah.
I am back December 2nd.
How about December 5?
December 5 works.
Okay,
Okay,
all right.
this time, this station right here. So if you get me contact information
I'll get to go down,
on the
yeah,
Hudson Sun,
I'll look into that tomorrow.
email that to me, and if you could, I know you do a great job with the minutes, as soon, you probably got them, whenever you need to adjust what you've got, if you can
Mhm.
get them out to us
Mhm.
the next few days, so I can refer back to that,
Yeah, probably this weekend.
that's good.
Motion to adjourn?
That's
Seconded?
non-debatable,
Oh,
if it's seconded,
I seconded it.
all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, folks.